A man saves a dying eagle. 30 years later, while feeding his livestock on his farm, a hungry wolf suddenly lunges forward out of a nearby bush. Everything seems lost, but the same eagle he had saved shows up and repays him in an incredible way. As Ryan began his task of walking toward the vast animal shed, he noticed a rustling in the bush. His skin tingled with fear, but seeing the wind at its highest, he dismissed the noise and continued on. He hadn't walked far when the bush rustled again. A sense of awe surrounded him, sharpening his reflexes. Yes, it must be the wind, he said to himself, trying to calm his pounding heart. Ryan decided to feed his farm animals one more meal before dusk. He looked forward to sharing the evenings with his animals. He reared goats, pigs, chickens, and sheep. His franchise was quite popular for its healthy animals, but the job was becoming difficult, especially in the winter, to keep up. The animals were usually cold and easily exhausted. Ryan lived far away from town, with the forest surrounding his house, and the nearest neighbor was a few kilometers away. He lived a quiet life and cherished the healing and peace that nature provided. He heard another rustle, more prolonged. He heard it distinctly because the wind had dropped. Something wasn't right. Led by overwhelming curiosity, fixing his eyes on the rustling bush, he trod carefully. His eyes twitched as he saw something alarming in the bush, a fleck of brown fur that disappeared in an instant. It was probably a squirrel. There was nothing to fret about. He soon dismissed it as his mind playing tricks on him. Ryan gasped, relieved that there was nothing unusual. He concluded it was just the chilly weather. He turned his back to continue his chore when the rustling noise jolted him out of his skin. He made a swift turn and came face to face with a gray wolf. He paled and stumbled backward, knocked out of breath at its frightening look. The creature had no intention of walking away. It flaunted its canines and took slow steps toward him. Ryan trembled with fear. He had never encountered a wolf in his life, but had seen them moving in packs a long distance from his home. Is it here for my livestock? What should I do? Would it attack me if I tried to scare it away? Crying out for help seemed like the wrong action to take. It would only escalate the situation. His eyes drifted around for any sort of weapon, but to his disappointment, there was nothing he could use to fight the animal. The wolf wasn't backing down. Ryan's legs had suddenly frozen, and his heart was exploding in his chest. He couldn't watch the animal any longer, so he closed his eyes, feeling helpless and vulnerable. Then he heard a high-pitched screech and was forced to look up. A large bird with broad wings cast a shadow over him. It circled around the man and the wolf. The wolf seemed to be captivated by the majestic bird lurking above them. The golden beak and talons paired with its white and brown wings gave away its identity. It was a bald eagle. Without hesitation, the eagle swooped down and dug its talons into the wolf. Ryan couldn't believe the odd event unfolding before him. Just when all hope was lost, his savior appeared to defend him. The wolf had been so distracted by the bird that it didn't pay Ryan any attention. This was beyond ordinary. The man was speechless. He just stared in bewilderment at the large bird that saved his life. The eagle was a symbol of strength as it looked unfazed by the battle with the wolf. Ryan spotted a metal band around its leg. The band had blackened from tarnishing. He tilted his head, considering the chances. This was something he had seen before. It can't be, he shook his head, doubting further. He took a step forward, then squinted to have a closer look and gasped. He could never have expected such a revelation. He looked back at a fateful spring evening, a life-changing experience. Ryan always had a soft spot for birds. He had grown up identifying birds from his grandpa, who worked as an ecologist studying animal populations and their migratory behavior. His grandpa's teachings and experiences shaped Ryan into a bird specialist over the years and led him to study ornithology in college, the study of birds. Although he was passionate about birds, he had to carry on the family farm, which he had inherited and which occupied most of his time. However, he still loved birds and took up the hobby of bird catching to monitor rare and endangered species and have the authorities conserve them. One fateful day 3 decades ago, Ryan crossed paths with the eagle at an unusual location. The bird lover navigated through the forest to cut down trees and gather wood for his fireplace. Ryan unexpectedly heard a low squawk, which stopped him in his tracks. He twirled around, curiosity getting the best of him. Ryan stared above. Perhaps it was a bird passing by. He continued walking and stopped when the cry sounded closer. Where he stood gave him access to the vivid scene of the area, but he didn't find anything lurking around. He checked behind trees and darted his gaze over branches, but still nothing. The cry stopped, and something scared Ryan about the silence. He quickly hurried to double-check the spots he had searched earlier. This time, he found the remains of a nest covered by sand. Carefully, he lowered himself to the ground and gently scraped inch by inch of sand covering the nest. An eaglet with a strained neck appeared. Apparently, it was helpless and weak. It was probably just a few weeks old. Ryan's heart swelled with relief, knowing he had rescued the poor animal. But how long had it been buried under the tree? He looked above, sensing the possibility that the nest had once sat on the mighty tree with its branches hanging over him. Where was its mother? Were there others like it lying around? He had thoroughly scanned the location and doubted there were more trapped eaglets. He gently pulled out the bird and placed it in his large hands. The bird screeched weakly, nodding its head. At that moment, Ryan couldn't think of a better name to describe the bird's tenacity, so he called it Orion. The Greek name conveyed the animal's courage to live despite being on the brink of death. A smile widened on Ryan's face. He changed his mind about fetching wood since he had some that could last a day or two. Momentarily, his aim had shifted to nursing the bird to safety. He didn't mind that he had come all this way for nothing. The creature in his hand was worth more than 1,000 logs. Ryan mimicked a delightful chirp to elevate the bird's chance of survival and give it hope that it would live to grow into a decent eagle. Deep down, Ryan wished he could return to pursuing his career, but his hobby served a purpose. He missed studying birds, but he was content enough to devote his time to monitoring bird species and preventing bird poachers from leading them to extinction. Now was the time to put the practice he had learned in college and his farmland experience to good use. As he hurried his steps through the forest, he hoped that the bird would stay with him until he reached his house. He mimicked that eaglet sound, but the bird had ceased responding with body movement. He could see Orion was slipping away from him. He soothed him with calming words in between gasps. "Hi, little birdie. You're not going away just yet. Stay with me. We're almost home where you'll receive treatment and be okay in no time." The bird seemed to understand Ryan's words and struggled to chirp faintly. Ryan had his trust, and in no time, they arrived at his farm. Ryan gently placed the bird on a table and assessed for visible signs of illness or strain. The numerous troubles the bird seemed to be dealing with were stress, malnutrition, and abandonment. If he hadn't rescued Orion, there was a slim possibility that he would have survived. Ryan found a shoebox in which to lay the animal. It was easier to carry it that way. Then Ryan warmed him by the fire with a small towel over him. The bird specialist was conflicted about what to feed Orion. Usually, eaglets are fed regurgitated food by their mother, primarily bits of prey. They can't digest processed milk, so he was caught in a tight spot. He opted for water and soon came up with an idea. He dashed his refrigerator and scanned its contents. When he found a piece of fresh fish he caught by the river, he cut it into pieces and boiled it. This could work for the eaglet's developing body. Afterward, he fed Orion, who gobbled down his meal and seemed to brighten up before he fell asleep. Ryan took Orion to the vet the next day, who further ran the diagnosis and treatment. He was relieved to hear the bird was in perfect condition with no signs of complication. To prevent further problems, he was vaccinated. Orion returned to Ryan's care. Ryan watched him grow into a stronger version of himself every passing day. Ryan had a large cage made for him, a wired mesh covering a few square meters to give Orion enough freedom to fly and flap his wings. But the eagle was occasionally left to explore the wild and return when it chose. Seeing that the eagle was growing past his abilities, he envisioned the inevitable. Unknown to Ryan, Orion had lived happily with his mother. He pecked his head every time she arrived from her hunt, and they would share the meal. The mother-son bond was irresistible. Orion's happiness came to an unexpected end when his mother was captured, and he was left to fend for himself in the cold. He couldn't fly and couldn't feed himself. The young bird had cried for his mother all day, but she never returned. Orion had to accept that she was never coming back. He was lonely, confused, and heartbroken. Determined with a purpose to survive, he never surrendered despite his mother's absence. He was lucky she had built him a nest high above the ground because his cries had drawn predators to the tree. Since height was a disadvantage, they mostly left. Unfortunately, an ugly storm felled the nest to the ground, anchoring Orion in the soil. The flood had partly buried the shivering eaglet, leaving him little space to breathe and cry for help. How he survived the trauma couldn't be explained, but it was evident that his will to survive overshadowed any other feeling. The next day, Ryan found him hidden in the sand. The weak eaglet had bloomed into a powerful bird. Ryan thought it was time to release Orion into the wild. However, there was something he had to do first. Ryan feared that the day to release the eagle was approaching since he had significantly grown, and his wings had an extensive span. It was challenging to let the creature out of his sight. He still saw Orion as that helpless eaglet that needed to be protected. He had grown fond of him, and it broke his heart. Ryan proceeded to wear the metal ring over Orion's left leg. It was a copper band with a string of numbers to set it apart from the other bald eagles. Ryan choked on a sob as he looked at Orion, who seemed to understand his plight. Orion spread his wings wide and walked forward on the stone bench, gazing into Ryan's eyes. He chattered heartily and leaped onto Ryan's angled hand, clutching with his talons. Ryan finally said his last words and beckoned the bird into the wild, watching his brilliance dominate the sky with a powerful presence. Ryan waved and hoped they would meet again. The eagle visited every night, and his trails brought Ryan outside to see Orion's silhouette on a tree branch. It was a beautiful moment for both of them. These visits continued for months until Orion stopped. Ryan felt a blow to his heart, but took courage that they would cross paths again someday. Eventually, that day came, and Ryan watched in astonishment as the creatures fought ferociously. The bird's beak poked deeply into the wolf's coat until it bled. The eagle took calculated strikes as the wolf defended itself, leaping to thrash it with its claws and teeth. The formidable bird drew back from the wolf, awaiting the perfect time to strike. When they least expected it, it dived from the sky and struck the wolf's head with its powerful beak. The wolf, seeing that it had lost the fight, retreated. It staggered, wincing loudly with blood trickling down its body, and disappeared into the forest. Ryan doubted the wolf would ever pay him a visit. It had taken 30 years for the pair to meet again. The band around the eagle's leg had faded into a darkish hue, but the engraved numbers remained, and he could never forget them. Orion was back to save him. The creature wasn't injured in the slightest. He seemed to have grown to care for himself and others. This was a sign of incomprehensible strength. Ryan saw that his friend had adapted to the wild remarkably well. Tears welled in his eyes as he murmured the eagle's name. The eagle inched closer, lowering his head to show he remembered. Ryan slowly lifted his hand to touch the band around the eagle's leg, gasping at the reality of it. Their bond went beyond mere attachment. The world had repaid his act of compassion by sending Orion in his moment of need. He hadn't expected the eagle to remember him after so long, but he always hoped Orion was safe and never helpless again. The eagle held his neck high, chattering loudly and flapping his wings. It was time to go. Orion would always have a special place in Ryan's heart. The eagle soared high, casting a glance at Ryan before vanishing into the sky. Animals never forget good deeds. To this day, Orion never stopped visiting, and Ryan continued his efforts to save the bird population. What an incredible story! If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. See you in the next video.